Ltd, 2.6 GHz FWA, providing high-speed broadband connectivity, managed IT infrastructure services, cloud and cybersecurity solutions. Ascend Digital Solutions and Smart InfraCo are enabling next-generation technologies in Africa, with Ghana as the digital playground. We're building a booming African economy and closing in on the vision of holistic digital empowerment. Join us as we unlock the full potential of digital technologies and transform Africa into the world's largest digital economy. Africa is on the fast road to economic progress. At the destination is a burgeoning information and knowledge economy driven by financial inclusion and socio-economic advancement. Powering this progress is Ascend Digital Solutions, an award-winning digital transformation company that is reimagining digital for Africa. Ascend is accelerating progress in Africa's underserved regions and bridging the digital divide by charting a powerful digital roadmap underpinning economic growth, blending.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's webinar, our final webinar for the year. Today, we have an interesting topic. We are talking about public-private partnership in Africa's digital transformation. We have three speakers today, one from the public sector, another one from the private sector, and then another speaker who's worked in both the public and private sector. And they're here to share interesting perspectives of PPP and how they can accelerate Africa's digital transformation. Our first speaker for today is Johnson Kilangi. Johnson is an infrastructure, project finance, sustainability, and PPP consultant with 16 years of cumulative experience in the infrastructure sector. He has been involved in the advisory of various PPP projects in Kenya, Tanzania, Ethiopia, and Congo. Besides this, he founded the Africa Project Finance Program, an action-based Pan-African virtual training program that has trained more than 500 professionals in project finance and PPPs. He is also an adjunct lecturer of the Strathmore Business School in Kenya, offering industry-based PPP training. Johnson is the founder and chief executive of Mwindo Misingi Hub, an infrastructure hub based in Kenya that offers advisory and infrastructure sustainability solutions across Africa. He's a certified public accountant of Kenya and a member of the Institute of Certified Public Accountants, Kenya. He's a steering committee member and chair of the finance chapter of the World Association of PPPs units and professionals based in Geneva. He's also Kenya's Impact Global Alliance ambassador, championing the attainment of sustainable development goals through PPPs. Welcome, Johnson.
Thank you.
Okay. Our second speaker for today is Michael Kwabla. He has 3 decades of expertise in the technology industry, combining a deep understanding of business strategy with the agility required in today's rapidly evolving digital landscape. With extensive experience in planning and executing capital projects, designing innovative technology architectures, and developing tailored solutions, Michael's work is marked by a commitment to service excellence. A proven leader, Michael is renowned for building lean, high-performing teams and fostering a culture of efficiency and innovation. He's also deeply passionate about mentoring young engineers, helping them unlock their full potential. Beyond his professional pursuits, Michael enjoys playing badminton and exploring thought-provoking books that provide fresh perspectives on life. Michael, you're welcome to today's session.
Thank you, Thomas. Thank you very much.
Our third and final speaker is Kwame Ba Echamfor. Kwame is Ghana's counselor to the International Telecommunications Union and is responsible for international telecommunication ICT policies. Kwame is a seasoned telecoms engineer with a rich experience of over 25 years. His expertise spans multidisciplinary communication services, licensing, telecommunication network planning, operations, and maintenance. Kwame was the first African to be a steady group chairman at the ITU. He played a pivotal role in developing and approving over 80 global telecommunication standards, a testament to his profound contributions to the industry. He chaired the 2022 ITU Plenary Conference resolutions on artificial intelligence and cybersecurity, among other policies. He was honored by the initiators of Change Foundation at the eminent telecom and ICT pillar of the decade in 2021. Kwame, you're welcome to today's session.
Thank you very much.
So unfortunately, Kwame is having challenges today, so he may not be joining us on video, but via audio. But we still hope to have a very interactive session today. So, gentlemen, you're welcome to today's session. We are talking about public-private partnership in Africa's digital transformation. Okay. So to get us started, I'd like Johnson, first of all, if you can tell us, first of all, what public-private partnership means and what advantages it brings to Africa's digital transformation efforts compared to a purely public initiative and a purely private initiative.
Thank you very much, Thomas, and good afternoon to the audience. I think this is a very timely conversation that is coming at a time where Africa is looking forward to advance infrastructure development by bringing on board the private sector. But just to set foundation for the discussion, public-private partnership is basically an effective collaboration between a government agency and a private party who come together to work together to deliver a specific goal. In this case, the government side will engage the private sector to either design, build, finance, construct, and operate uh, an infrastructure asset and service for compensation of a specific fee as would have been agreed between the government and the private party. So the idea is to make sure that we're able to leverage private sector capital and also the innovation and expertise that the private sector has. So leveraging on that to make sure that there's alignment of goals and that at the end of the day, a government can achieve its goal of delivering a public service through engaging the private sector. Looking at the context of today's conversation, basically it means bringing on board a private sector to finance and build, digital infrastructure, and subsequently the private party will be paid if they meet certain criteria that will have been discussed and agreed between the two parties. Why is PPP important in the digital infrastructure space? We're looking at private sector bringing on the capital which perhaps government will not have at the moment, but private sector will leverage on their sources to bring that capital so that that infrastructure can be built. We're also looking at tapping from the expertise and innovation of the private sector. The private sector has the experience. It has been doing this. It is able to bring that experience so that at the end of the day, the private sector can deliver quality service to the ultimate beneficiaries of that project. So it's very important that we shape or we build an ecosystem that is able to attract this private capital and expertise into the digital infrastructure space.
Okay. Thank you, Johnson, for that. So, just to recap what he said, so PPP is an effective collaboration between government and agencies and private organizations to build infrastructure for the delivery of services to the public. And the key thing that you pointed out was is that this partnerships helps government to leverage the expertise and the innovation of the private sector to deliver on key services and to the public, which makes them more efficient, makes them meet the demands of the public. And it's good to know that it's something that is currently being worked on by some countries across the continent. But to move on from that, Michael, I know in you have been involved in some projects, but then just can you let us know what some of the obstacles are with PPPs, in the on the African continent, and maybe in Ghana specifically, what the challenges have been in delivering PPP projects, and what you think government and private sectors can better align to deliver on the goals of the PPP?
Okay, thank you, Thomas, and good afternoon to everyone. So, despite the general acceptance in Africa, as well as existence of success stories that we have in many African countries, there are still some challenges in having PPPs fully embraced in the region due to a number of challenges. So, let me highlight some of them. So the key one is lack of regulatory framework that can help the smooth passage of PPP implementation and protect participating partners and stakeholders. Also, there are no private investors to understand how to navigate the bureaucracy in managing PPP projects. If you look at it critically, unlike South Africa, Kenya, Tanzania, and few others that are having today a well-developed PPP regulatory framework that encompasses all sphere of their governance, um, rules and frameworks are put together mostly on the fly when PPPs are being considered in other countries, and this does not usually go well for the parties involved. Um, Secondly, most of these public institutions are not prepared nor have the manpower for PPP negotiations. Employees do not have the specific due diligence skills needed to ensure that PPPs are considered and viable or feasible. And this can lead to poor project designs and implementation. One other challenge that needs to be mentioned is lack of data. Most of these PPP projects are complex, and you need to have good feasibility studies done. And if you don't have the right data to do the feasibilities, then the project tends to either drag, right, for long periods. Apart from supporting international development banks and project developers, funding for feasibility studies by government institutions are normally inadequate. Another thing that I would like to highlight is political challenges, okay, remain in various public institutions that support PPPs. For example, when elections take place and leadership comes into place, there are challenges that are introduced to staff. And this can also be an incentive for investors. I mean, unfavorable investor perception of country risk. There's also a limited trust between the public and the private sector professionals. I mean, as the discussion goes on, I'll highlight some of them because we have experienced it in some of the projects that, sorry, we have delivered in Ghana. These challenges mentioned earlier are further compounded by shallow markets capital markets, all right, in most African countries, and they inhibit mobilization of capital to finance PPPs in the domestic markets. Usually, acquisition of foreign currency denominated loans from international capital markets also introduce exchange rate risk, which needs to be managed in the PPP transactions. So PPP transactions, it's a whole lot of challenges that this arrangement faces. So maybe there's the highlights that we have in terms of the challenges that I can mention, Thomas.
Okay. All right, thank you, Michael. So it's quite interesting. I noticed that some of the successful countries that you mentioned are countries that Johnson has worked with. So I'm sure Johnson has been behind those successful PPPs in Kenya and Tanzania. Right, but these are quite a number of challenges. I mean, the lack of private investors, the data, which is quite critical because without reliable data, you're able to deliver on your projects as expected. I mean, the political challenges, yes, we agree because once there's a change of government, you never know how a project would turn out because it could go either way during the partnership. And another interesting point is the FX rates that you mentioned, the last point, which seems to be quite an issue with a lot of new projects across the continent. So These are real issues that facing PPPs. But there's one particular one which you mentioned, which is the lack of regulatory framework. And on this, I would like Kwame. You're on the public side. You're with both the Ministry of Communications and the National Communications Authority. So, from your perspective, Kwame, from where you are, do you think policy and regulatory frameworks can be adapted to foster successful PPPs in Africa?
Indeed, and good afternoon to you all. Yes, the from policy, laws, and regulations are very important part of what will enable PPPs to strive in our digital transformation stage. We admit that many countries in Africa are still at the stage where their laws, their regulations are tailored towards telecom services rather than digital transformation. So to start out with, there will be the need for policies that are developed or refined or amended or even taken away. And you experienced the case of Ghana last week where we had a digital economy policy launched. This is after 20 years where we had the national telecom policies. And such policy is not just looking at services, but it's looking at how you stimulate both government agencies and private sectors to adopt ICTs in finance, trade, commerce, agriculture, health, and education. From the policy level, you would then have to get further down to laws, and here you will want to involve what kind of laws will be adaptable to various digital models. Some of the digital models are at the entry stage level, whereas some are at the maturity level. So, what market entry provisions can you have for emerging technologies, products, and services? But digital technology or digital economy also brings out the issue of privacy and cybersecurity. So you may want to look at laws that will take care of that. Further on, there will be the renewed competence of how you regulate a digital economy as against a telecom economy. Those are different. You have to look at how players or investors can get their profits, whereas you are also serving public good. Further on, to ensure that your public do not lose out on the digital economy benefits, is you also tailoring PPP projects that meets local needs and that ensure that it aligns with national development priorities. So you are not just looking at investors. If you are looking at PPP, you are looking at PPP where even the private has local investors, not just foreign investors. You will then have a plan of transition where even if it is government who invests so much from the start, you want to look at it that it will not be a government enterprise at the end of the day, but may turn out to be a local enterprise where both government and probably foreign investors exit or private investors share become minimum sort of. So here again, you are developing the private sector in your country or private investors in your country to run your digital economy. But to play in this market, because you are not just looking at the supplier, the supply, but you're also looking at the demand of the market. And here, how does your law even build capacity for stimulation and usage of the digital products, and even for government and for private investors in the country? How do they play in the digital market? You need to build capacity there. You are investing in digital infrastructure, sometimes are rural areas, but that will not be profitable like in the state of Ghana. So where here government again goes in for a substantial addition to the Universal Service Fund just to develop digital infrastructure to reach everybody for digital for national good. And of course, you need to create various incentives. Just as I said, laws that will have a lower barrier of entry for those who cannot pay tax immediately, delay taxes, and of course, you sharing risk with private investors. So that is where the government comes in when it comes to policies, comes to laws, and also comes to regulations. Thank you.
Uh, Thank you, Kwame. So I think it's interesting. So one of the key things you mentioned is to look at the PPP partnership, the project, not look at it not being a government enterprise at the end, but being a local enterprise and having the private sector deeply involved in managing this when it goes live. Which is quite important because we understand the government has a lot to manage when it comes to economy. And even though the PPP tends to be initiated by the government and they look for a private partner to execute, you end of the day, you can't have the government burden the government with managing this at the end of the day. And it's good to have the private sector expertise on board. And you also mentioned creating incentives, that would reduce the barrier to entry, for PPP projects, and then looking at how the investors and the players in the PPP can get their return on investment, but at the same time ensuring public good. So, I mean, there's a lot that needs to be done in terms of shaping the policy and regulatory frameworks to help successful PPPs. And it's interesting that you also said a lot of the policies now are geared towards telecoms and not digital transformation. So it means that's one of the key areas that we need to focus on because, yes, we know digital transformation, telecommunications is a key player, and connectivity is the foundation for digital transformation. But then we need to sort of reshape the policies because we're all looking at transforming Africa into a digital economy. So all our policies and frameworks, these which have been in existence for decades, need to be reshaped to meet what we're trying to achieve for a digital Africa economy. So thank you for that, Kwame. And Johnson, so just picking up from that, I mean, technology is key in digital transformation. And we know with technology, there comes a lot of risk, a lot of challenges. But looking at PPP and digital transformation specifically, what are the risks that you see in terms of technology and digital transformation? And if you can elaborate on some of the innovative approaches or models, probably from what you've done in Eastern Africa, and how these can be adopted to manage the risks that we face in digital transformation.
Yeah, thank you, Thomas. I think one of the challenges that we have with infrastructure projects in the digital space is the constant change in that particular space. You find that technology keeps on changing, and for that project to continue and constantly serve the intended need, there is need to do advancements and changes to make sure that it's in line with the technology that is in the market. That is one of the biggest challenge that we have because it requires the private party to continuously keep investing in that particular project to make sure that it serves the purpose. And the problem is that how the project is structured is that the private sector party will want to recoup its investment and, of course, a return of its investment over a specific period of time. And so, if these developments or advancements that have to be made on the project are not factored in the structuring and in the pricing of the project, you'll realize that the fundamentals of that PPP project will not hold, and definitely that project will fail. So there is need for us to be cognizant to that fact. There is need for government to be aware that as we continue operating that project, there will be changes. I mean, in a span of 2 years, 3 years, there will be need to advance that project to make sure that it's in line with the market trends and make sure that that is factored in the project structure so that as much as the private sector party has to invest additional capital as they go or operate the project, then they are compensated for that, or the return structure of that particular project factors that. So that's one threat that has to be looked into. And of course, the other thing is that as technology changes, there is risk that the technology that is going to be adopted might not work or might not deliver the intended benefits or services. And so that is another risk that the private sector and the lenders behind the private sector will be worried about before they can accept to invest in those particular projects. So I look at technology risk as one of the biggest challenges, and perhaps this is the reason why we're not seeing a lot of PPPs in this space, because lenders are a bit hesitant to put their money in a space where it's a bit unpredictable in terms of what kind of technology is going to be serving, at a particular period of time. And as I've said, how to ring fence that is to make sure that we have clauses that protect or ring fence the investment of the private sector, so that if that change or that advancement or that improvement has to be made, then the contract provides for mechanism as to how the private sector will inject additional capital and how they can also recoup a return of that additional investment that has to be put in that particular project. Of course, my colleagues have mentioned issues around a regulatory framework. Those are issues that are not clear because of the constant change in the digital infrastructure space. So, if the laws are not robust enough to provide for mechanisms to protect this investment, then you realize that not many investors will want to pump resources in this space. So those are some of the key risks I see in this space. But of course, as we progress, we're going to discuss more in that particular space.
Okay. Thank you very much. And just Johnson, before that, so in terms of what you've done in Eastern Africa, are there any, aside the rest that you've mentioned, has there been any um, challenges in some of the PPP initiatives you've been involved in? And if you can mention some of the successful ones that you've executed in Eastern Africa.
So I think I should have mentioned first of all that definition of PPPs varies. I mean, from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, each country will have its own definition of PPPs. So if you look at a country like Kenya, there has been a lot of developments in the digital infrastructure space, but those developments, as much as they've involved a lot of uh, heavy lifting from government side and of course significant investment from the private sector side, they might not fall under the clear definition of PPP and as provided for by the PPP Act of Kenya. But just to give you an example, the government of Rwanda um, is rolling a PPP in the provision of 4G services, whereby the government of Rwanda entered into a JV with a private company, KT Corporation, and the role of the private party was to bring the capital, build, operate the 4G network for a period of 25 years. And that has significantly, allowed the coverage across Rwanda, especially in the remote areas of Rwanda. So it's a typical PPP in that space that has worked and ultimately delivered the goal that government wanted to through a PPP. So that's a good example. Of course, I can give more details as to how that is going on. Of course, there are challenges, but the most important thing is to make sure that at the end of the day, the parties are aligned towards making sure that when challenges arise, they resolve so as to make sure that the project continues and delivers on the intended objective.
Thanks, Johnson. So one of the things I learned is that the new technology that might come up, because technology is always changing, and there are times when the new technology might not work for the project or the intention that it's supposed to serve. So that poses a huge challenge to the PPP initiatives. And but then again, we need to sort of adapt and align to a changing technology as we move ahead, which is quite key. So that comes to in terms of your project planning, what the identify what the risks are, and also be prepared to adjust as and when these risks come up. But most importantly, the framework and environment needs to be conducive enough that will allow the private sector to be able to invest in these changing technologies and at the same time also recoup their investments within a reasonable period of time. There's one interesting point you made, example of Rwanda, where you said the government invited a private partner to manage the 4G infrastructure over a period of time, which is quite similar to something that's was done recently in Ghana with the rollout of 4G, 5G network, where a private entity was asked to roll out the infrastructure to allow all other operators to connect and thereby provide connectivity nationwide. So it saves the private sector money in terms of investment to build their own infrastructure. So I'm sure, Michael, you talk a bit about that as you go along. But then, to you, Michael, what steps do you think private companies can take to align their objectives with the public good when delivering digital projects?
Okay, let me put it this way: when governments work with industry partners, right, the resulting infrastructure delivers both the public sector outcomes and accountability, and the private sector efficiency. And mostly depending on the specifics of the partnership. Okay, the state can hold partial or full ownership of the network, which means there's some accountability. Excuse me. Sorry. That a partnership is structured users in mind. At the same time, you see, when we have this infrastructure run efficiently by an industry partner with the technical know-how, the experience needed to run a career-grade network, right, provide the necessary services that is required for the public. Let me use a typical example. I will just go through a couple of scenarios. So Ascend has a subsidiary which is Smart Infraco that works with NITA. We have a partnership arrangement with NITA. So NITA owns a world-class digital infrastructure, right? And this infrastructure um, was not in a good state. The government normally have assets, but they don't spend in maintaining the infrastructure. So NITA had this infrastructure that we had a partnership arrangement with, and what we bring to the table was that look, we have the needed skill sets, we have track record building digital infrastructure, we have partners, world class partners that we work with. We work with Nokia, we work with Tech Mahindra, we work with Radisson. So we have a lot of experience that we brought to the table. When we had this arrangement, one thing that we tried to do was that look, we need to build the human capital, the skill sets of the team that was managing that infrastructure. So we took the team, all right, to join us over a period of let me say 8 months to 1 year, where we took them through the various upgrades of skill sets, bringing experience to bear from that time, I think Tata, where there was a lot of knowledge transfer. So after a period of time, then we had to arrange with NITA, the government, and give opportunity to those that really want to leave the government sector to join us. They join us, and look, it's been marvelous. Some of the challenges that we encountered in terms of the cultural working, I mean, the way they used to work in the public sector, the way we also work in the private sector, there was issues. But after 6, 8 months, we saw a drift of the working culture, and we did a lot of work. If you look at some of the infrastructure that we had, um, NITA has two data centers, one in Accra, which is tier three. Most of the services were not running properly. Okay, there were a lot of frequent breakdowns of power facilities, air conditioning. We need to revamp the whole infrastructure to bring service levels from, let's say, 88% to now 99.99%, where there's no challenges in terms of service delivery to the users. If you take another infrastructure like the Eastern Corridor fiber backbone, this infrastructure had seen a lot of deterioration. All right, it's a 48 core fiber infrastructure. If you look at it, the time we had this partnership arrangement, it was only two of this 48 core that was working because it's due to road construction, filling stations coming along the stretch. And we needed to change about 76% of the whole fiber infrastructure. We buried all of them, revamped the whole infrastructure. The capacity at that time was just 1 gig, right? And we needed to upgrade it to 10 gig. Today we have upgraded it to 100 gig capacity. And it's not serving only the public institutions along the Eastern Corridor in Accra, it's also serving the other ISPs providers. Today, MTN uses that infrastructure to provide service to a lot of their sites in the northern part of the country and the OT and Pota regions. The same situations applies to Telecel, who is using the infrastructure to deliver service to their users. They also have this LTE infrastructure that was not functioning properly. We needed to invest heavily to bring the services up to make sure that the government institutions that were relying on this infrastructure to use are now having reliable service. And trust me, Thomas, the kind of investment that we've done and the arrangement that we've brought together with NITA, it is really delivering the necessary results because we have proper governance processes or structures in place. We meet periodically, we review the performance, and there are new service levels that we sign with each of their clients or new clients that comes. Unlike before, when issues happen, it takes quite a long time to resolve them. Today, on the fly, within 4 hours, within a day, we get issues resolved. We've also established contact centers where users or the government institutions that are using the service, when there are issues on their service, they call the contact center. And the contact center front end personnel are empowered to resolve about 75 to 80% of escalation that gets to them. So once the issues are resolved, they are fine, we communicate back to them. If they are not resolved, then the issues are escalated to the back end staff who takes care of the issue or escalate to the field engineers. One critical thing that we've also put in place is that, for example, the Eastern Corridor, we've had field managed service partners for the past 3 years who patrol the link, all right, and ensure that any risk, any threat, okay, to that infrastructure that can disrupt service, we proactively engage them, stop them, we relocate the infrastructure, or we make sure that we have engineer station to prevent disruption of service. So these are some of the things, examples that I can give to make sure that whatever arrangement, partnership arrangement we have with NITA is working as we expect. All right. I don't know if I need to go on. We have several examples that I can give, but let me end on this note.
All right, thank you very much, Michael. So you mentioned that PPP, you need to ensure PP delivers on public sector accountability and private sector efficiency.
Yeah,
The public sector is accountable to the people of the nation.
yeah,
We need to ensure that whatever they're doing, they ensure they're accountable, and
yeah,
they're also leveraging the efficiency of the private sector to deliver on this. So
yeah.
that's the partnership really works, comes together and works. Okay, so thank you very much for that, Michael. And also, it's also good to know that in terms of your PPP, so not just come together to deliver a project, we're also looking at knowledge and skill transfer. So you give an example of your NITA, the technical guys that came on board, sharing their knowledge and skills, expertise that they can or they're able also able to transfer to the organizations, which means that at least we are also moving some of our efficiency into the public sector that helps them deliver on their promise to the people. So thank you very much for that, Michael. Next, Kwame. So again, from your end, what do you think are some of the innovative financing models that can support a PPP in Africa, and how can international investors be encouraged to participate in more of PPPs? You haven't worked in both NCA and the ministry. Kwame? Hello, Kwame.
Right. Thank you
Right.
for this. Yes, financing is very critical for PPPs and away from the traditional methods. I'm coming up with about six ways we could look at this. Interestingly, for the African continent, we have the five geographical subregions inside Africa: the North, the West, the East, and the Central and South. But we also have the diaspora subregion as part of the African Union. And we have to take good advantage of the Africans in their diaspora, where we promote diaspora bonds for nationals or dual nationalities of Africa who are living abroad or working abroad to invest in their country's development projects. Because this is an area where it seems untapped, and it will again reinforce the relationship between Africans within Africa and Africans out of Africa. In Ghana, some years ago, we had a situation where there was an initial public offer of a telecom entity just because it was a requirement for their 4G license. And from that experience, we realized that those who purchased the shares the most were Ghanaians who were living outside the country. So that could be one way. The second one is what we call the green bonds. These days, all you hear is cop that, cop that, cop that, cop that. And there seem to be a certain interest in the climate and financing towards that part. Again, Africa has sunshine. What we do not have is the tapping to have green energy. So again, we have to float bonds for green where if we are going solar, we are taking advantage of the economies of scale or scope, and then saying that because Africa is going solar but this number of years, we issue green bonds where people could invest and they know that because Africa is going green and solar, their investment will have their a good return on investment in a faster way. Again, even to go back to the diaspora bonds, here Africans living in diaspora need not in every time just bring money into their families or to even do their projects. But when they invest in projects, in development projects, they could actually be financing their families and other things through coupons from what they have initially invested. So I want those who are listening in the diaspora to take advantage of some of these. Then the third one will be the Islamic finance, where again, there seem to be some finance and that aligns with um, asset-backed nature and risk sharing attributes, and especially for Islamic communities, and they are spread in many countries in Africa. So we want to look at that. Another that we can look at is a blended finance. Sometimes there are those who want to give grants or those who are benevolent, they want to have philanthropic contributions, but we could mix that with government and private to go on a bigger scale. So rather than we having philanthropic contributions probably towards a clinic, whereas we need a hospital, then private investors and government investment come in to have such a blended finance to actually address problems or on a bigger scale. Then the fifth one will be what sometimes we call it the crowdfunding. So here, those who are supposed to be in competition will rather collaborate to have a bigger investment rather than their smaller investments in infrastructure. So here we're talking about people who are saying internet service providers, and then you can have 200 of them. But why don't we have internet service providers in certain geographical locations syndicated so that I mean they invest together and share together because you cannot satisfy all geographical. So this could be another way. One thing with Africa is how our currency depreciates. And again, we can look at local currency financing, where investors are not just those who are bringing in foreign currency, but local investors who have the components of their local currencies. And local currency financing could be looked at and to ensure that currency fluctuations are not a challenge for this. So these are the six that I can mention that if we can take advantage of it, it can foster our development and uplift our communities towards a prosperous future. Thank you.
Mm. Thank you, Kwame. So the local currency financing also quite key because it goes back to the point Michael made as one of the challenges in PPPs because they have the FX fluctuations which tends to affect the project. It derails the project. It makes it more expensive in the end. It takes longer, etc. So yes, investing using the local currencies helps protect the local currency and helps manage the fluctuation, and also getting people in the diaspora to invest. Come invest in your home country, come back and invest here for yourself, and not just investing, but also looking at investments. That can also bring you returns to help you support your family. So it works in two ways for those in diaspora. So if there's anybody out there, diaspora listening, that's one way of looking at it. So rather than just sending your hard-earned cash all the time, you can invest and you get a return to also support your family. So yeah, two things: you're benefiting, families benefiting as well. And green bonds, yeah, it's true. I mean, we have a lot of sunshine, but we are unable to tap into our green energy, and that is making that area attractive because look, you mentioned this the COP 25, COP whatever happening every year. Yeah, and it's something that's growing every year, and there's a lot of interest in investing in green energy. So that's another area to look at. So thank you very much, Kwame, for these six ways to look at financing for PPP initiatives, and I hope our listeners are taking note of this so we can sort of communicate that to the investors out there. So thank you very much. So, Johnson, I'll come back to you again. We know that in terms of digital transformation, like mentioned earlier, that connectivity is one of the best for digital transformation. Because enable everybody to be a part of all this digital revolution that's happening in the company. We need to ensure that people have superior connectivity. So beyond connectivity, how do you think digital infrastructure can be leveraged to enhance success of other economic and social PPP projects, such as transport sector, the healthcare sector, education? If you can back these up with some examples that you know of or that you happen to be involved with.
Yeah, thank you, Thomas. I was losing you at some point, but I think I got the question. I think it's very important for us to emphasize the role that digital infrastructure and connectivity plays, in shaping the world, in making life bearable, improving efficiencies in the economy. And I think it's coming from that background that we try and see how can other projects leverage on quality and effective digital infrastructure to make sure that those projects thrive, those projects are attractive to the private sector, so that when they're taken to the market, they're able to attract quality investors. So I think, yes, quality and efficient digital infrastructure plays a very critical role in enhancing the success of other projects. If you're looking at, for example, transport sector, for example, there are many ways that we can leverage on connectivity. First of all, to check on the maintenance of transport infrastructure projects. You can leverage on connectivity to check how the road users apply on the roads. For example, if you want to make sure that you can enhance discipline on the roads, you can utilize connectivity, whether it's your fiber connections with camera installations on the road network, to make sure that you can effectively monitor and check and make sure that the road users, motorists, adhere to the laid down traffic regulations. And this goes a long way in making sure that if private sector is investing in some of those projects, they are guaranteed that the investment is going to be safe. They're guaranteed that they're able to, if, for example, you're looking at a tolled road, for example, we can leverage on connectivity to make sure that we can enhance revenue collection from the motorists, because you can leverage on connectivity to just make sure that you're able to know what cars are applying on the road. So that is to say, projects can benefit from quality digital connectivity and infrastructure. Look at healthcare sector, for example. We can leverage on connectivity to connect medical installations, such that these installations can share data, can leverage on experience of personnel in specific areas to deliver services in other areas. For example, in the remote locations whereby it might not justify to bring personnel to those centers. So that shows how we can leverage on digital infrastructure to make sure that we enhance the efficiency of other projects in different sectors. But this can only happen if government is able to build, that requisite ecosystem, a conducive environment that allows other sectors to benefit from, the backbone digital infrastructure that makes it possible for these other projects to benefit from. Government plays a significant role, and we must make sure that that ecosystem is right, whether it's looking at the regulatory framework, whether it's looking at the financial architecture. I think Kwame has highlighted very well issues around financing of these projects. We must make sure that we are innovative in making sure that private local finance participates in these projects, so that we can see more and more of these projects coming, and of course benefiting from the digital infrastructure that is available in the country.
Yeah, thanks, Johnson. I think the important thing here is, which I think has come up in a lot of the responses from our speakers, is building that enabling and conducive environment and ecosystem to allow for these projects to actually be successful, PPP partnerships to be successful. So that's very important, and we can also leverage the connectivity, for example, in terms of delivering healthcare to your remote area, for example, in the transport sector, for monitoring, for example, discipline on the road, which I'm sure in East Africa, Kenya, I'm sure you guys are doing already, because I know in Ghana there's been a lot of work around that to use to monitor discipline on the road in terms of transport. Are there any specific examples you can give of Kenya or anywhere in East Africa, Josie?
Well, there are quite a number. Perhaps maybe just to mention the Nairobi Expressway, which is currently operational, 27-kilometer, $800 million expressway built through the PPP. So they leverage on digital, infrastructure to collect tolls from motorists that use the road. So ensuring that they can monitor vehicles as they enter the start of the road all the way to where they'll be exiting, calculating the distance, knowing the weights of the vehicles, the classes, and automatically calculating the toll. So this could not have been possible if there was no robust connectivity already laid across the city and across the country. So that goes to show how such projects can benefit, So the private sector is guaranteed that they can leverage on that backbone infrastructure to make sure that they're able to generate cash flows so that those cash flows can go back to repaying the debt and, of course, paying a return to the investors who've built that project. But there are quite a number. All these projects that you're seeing coming up in East Africa, big projects, they definitely leverage on the robust infrastructure that has already been laid across the country. And this is what we are saying. We have to make sure that that backbone infrastructure is built, it's efficient, government is protecting it, it's supporting it, so that it can incentivize the private sector to invest in other supportive projects that can benefit from this infrastructure.
Thank you very much, Johnson. So, Michael, you've worked on a number of projects here in Ghana, and from where you sit, from what you see, what are some of the trends that you foresee in the development of PPP in the future?
Sorry, Thomas. I think what are some of the?
The trends that you foresee in the space of PPP, based on your expertise, like what you've seen here, what are some of the trends that you foresee, shaping PPP in Africa?
Yeah. Okay. So I see um, a lot of investments coming into Africa. ADB, I think 2022, I read a report where they indicated that by 2025, they expect to have about $130 billion to 150 $70 billion investment on infrastructure in Africa. And I think is still Africa needs a lot of investment in infrastructure. And like my colleagues just mentioned, I've seen a lot of investments coming in Africa. One typical thing that example that I can give outside Ghana is South Africa. I think they have one of the best roads, like Johnson was talking about roads, and South Africa, if you look at what they have on PVP, it's they have a private partner who checks the maintenance of the road. They check potholes, they check, and they regularly go around drive to make sure that these roads are always in good condition. And I see it's happening on some of the infrastructure happening in Africa. We need to make sure that we have the necessary investments, we have the necessary skill set, the personnel that we have in terms of the government institutions. We need to make sure that we have the right knowledge transfer after the infrastructure is built for them to manage this infrastructure. The other thing that I'm seeing in terms of digitalization is, I'll give a typical example. I like to give examples. So in Ghana, if you look at what we've worked with GIFEC, where we are doing the rural telephony, let me put it this way: you have industry players, okay, like the telcos. They have a lot of infrastructure, but they are keeping it to themselves or sharing among themselves. This infrastructure can be used. If you look at the tower companies, they have a lot of towers around the country that can be leveraged on. So what we did was that, look, we went into partnership arrangements where we deploy rural telephony service. Then this rural service also ride on the towerco's infrastructure and also rides on the transport backbone of the mobile network operators. So you see the ecosystem where we have private institutions bringing their infrastructure, and you have Ascend, which is providing the necessary skill sets or expertise, engineers to make sure that these things are developed or um, deployed to provide the necessary environment for the users in the country. So for me, I think I see a lot of investments coming in, okay, and I also see another trend of leveraging on existing infrastructure, okay, that is already in a country to deliver the necessary digital transformation. Let me add one quick example, okay? Another one where we have a World Bank project that was supposed to deliver infrastructure to serve public institutions like the regional hospitals, the police stations, the district assemblies, right? So what we did was that we formed a partnership arrangement with one of the mobile network operators to build a huge infrastructure, okay, that can support what the government needed, okay, where we have about 200 gig capacity to the two data centers we have in Ghana, Accra and Kumasi. We also build the necessary rings in terms of capacity. After putting up this infrastructure, it became so much easy for the government to go into an arrangement with the public NGIC, which is has been given the license to roll out 5G. And within 6 months, based on that infrastructure, NGIC is able to deliver the 5G and making it ready for other public institutions to use, and as well as the private institutions. So I see a trend of investments coming in and also leveraging on existing infrastructure to provide the necessary digital transformation required in Africa. So if you look at what is happening in Ghana, I'm sure we'll have similar things replicating in other African countries.
Yeah, thank you. So, I mean, one is the investment, and it'll be good to next year to see if what ADB predicted becomes a reality. That by 2025 there'll be 130 to 170 billion dollar
Yes.
investment in infrastructure in Africa. So I hope new ADB can share an updated report next year, so we know how far we've come as the continent. But then the other part you mentioned is leveraging existing infrastructure. And it's interesting that you mentioned the example of the World Bank project where you build infrastructure to connect and deploy the service to government institution. And that was leveraged to deploy the 5G infrastructure. So that also, that in addition to the raw telephony that you mentioned, also highlights a point of collaboration within the ecosystem. So in terms of PPP, yes, one PPP initiative could lead to further collaboration, could help deepen, strengthen, and build up the ecosystem and get more partners involved. So it's not, I think, in my opinion, we just see it as a standalone initiative that's being done, but then there are other opportunities to build on that and then to build something bigger and better for the national good. So thank you very much, Michael, for that. And for Kwame, hello, Kwame, are you there? We seem to have lost Kwame. Okay, all right. So one question for both Michael and Johnson. So yes, we've spoken about the risk. We spoke about the financing models, etc. And we've even given examples of some PPP initiatives that you've been involved in or you know about. But from your perspective, what are some of the recommendations that you would give to stakeholders who are trying to initiate a PPP initial partnership and how this can support Africa's digital growth? So, Johnson, I'll allow you to go first.
Yeah, thank you, Thomas. I think it's very important first for government to clearly establish what it wants to achieve in terms of developing digital infrastructure over a relatively long time period of time. So, what is the strategic plan that government wants to put in place so that this is sounded to the private sector so that they can start having an early look at opportunities that they can tap into. That's very important. All these projects are put together to address a specific need. There is a fundamental requirement that government is able to clearly establish this need define it properly so that whatever projects that are put together are able to effectively meet that particular need. So that's very important, and the responsibility there of government. There's equally importance of building capacity around using the PPP model to deliver digital infrastructure. Um, this is a unique space. How we structure this project is different from other PPP projects. So there's need for public officials to build capacity, to share experiences and learn from failures from other countries, and make sure that we avoid similar challenges in our respective countries. So building that capacity is very key. There's also need for us to build the local financial architecture so that we can see more of finance, local finance, flowing into these projects. As I always say, it is impossible for us to implement sustainable PPPs in whatever sector if we continue leveraging or depending on foreign financing, of course, because of a number of reasons, including the forex risk that, of course, might jeopardize the structure of these projects. So that is very important. I mean, it's easier said. We can have these discussions, but government has to get down to business. It has to identify these projects, package them properly, and bring them to the market, build that ecosystem. When you're looking at the regulatory framework, it has to be robust, it has to be activated at all times to make sure that it continuously protects private sector investment. We talk about political framework. How do we give confidence to the private sector that we'll have smooth transitions in our countries? These projects cannot thrive if there's uncertainties every 4 or 5 years period when we have to go for elections. There's need for us to make sure that we're building an atmosphere that triggers or gives confidence to the private sector. So these are some of the issues that we need to quickly address. I have seen a question by one of the audience, issues around the duration it takes to prepare these projects before they come to the market. We need to synchronize these processes, align them so that we can see projects flowing much faster in the upstream development processes so that they can be brought to the market. We identify the right partners, negotiations are done, and so that we can see more and more of these projects being implemented.
Thank you, Johnson. So, Michael, what are some of your recommendations?
Okay, so Thomas, for me, I believe Africa stands at a decisional threshold regarding the development of sustainable digital infrastructure. Right, I firmly believe that both the public and the private sectors can remove impediments hindering the growth of digital infrastructure and find ways to modernize policies. I think that's quite critical that Johnson mentioned to encourage investment and innovation through out the digital infrastructure ecosystem. I believe um, this can be achieved through long-term working agreements, right? It needs to be formalized through PPP. Any investor coming in should be assured, okay, of having a long-term arrangement. It's not easy to come by capital now these days. Like Kwame mentioned earlier, we need investment, but we need investors to also have some kind of assurance. Um, the engagement of the public and the private sector through PPP can deliver Africa from digital infrastructure development, all right, inertia that exists in much of our territories or much of our regions. Um, we must address a couple of things. Let me highlight some of them. Okay, so uh, protection of whatever infrastructure that we put in place, it needs to be protected. It needs to be operated properly. We need to have them monitored. We need to have ways of means to remove apathy. In our kind of way that we work, people don't support such investments coming in from the private sector. But we need to create some level of awareness within Africa for our people to embrace this private sector initiatives. And if you look at what is happening today, most of the proposals of PPPs are always initiated by the private sector. When it gets to the government, there are a lot of challenges that it goes through. We need to have strategies that embrace technology leapfrogging. All right, that's also quite critical for us. We need to make sure that we have people buying into this. So for me, it's going to be very interesting, okay, journey ahead of us, but we need to get everybody involved, right?
Thank you, Michael. I think we just got Kwame back. Kwame, hello, Kwame. Can you hear me?
Yes, Thomas, I can hear you. My
Yes. So
apologies.
we're Michael and Johnson just shared some recommendations for stakeholders who are interested in initiating and supporting PPPs for Africa's digital goals. So, do you have any recommendations for PPP initiatives for the stakeholders, potential stakeholders?
Yes, I hear both trying to put a lot on government, and indeed, government has to be fixed. I agree to that. Protection of public good. I agree to that. So now that you see the peace, what we have not done as governments in Africa is how to
So, Kwame, you seem to be losing you. Hello? Okay. I think the line to Kwame is not clear. So, I'm sure he'll join us again. Okay, so in today, thank you, gentlemen. Johnson, Kwame, and Michael. Oh, Kwame is back. Hello, Kwame.
Oh, you lost me somewhere there again.
Yes, you
Sorry.
lost. Yes, you
Yeah.
lost. We
What?
couldn't
What?
really hear what you said. Yeah.
Yeah. What I was saying is that governments have to protect both profits and then also the public, the profits of investors, but again to promote, if you like, Pan Africanism. Pan African investment. That's what we want to do with trade. So African governments have to speak among themselves, and when they are talking about digitalization, what products and applications are doing well elsewhere that could be scaled up to achieve that single digital market for Africa. And again, that goes to, if it could be reciprocal. I mean, every country could come up with a product that could be scaled up across all African countries. I think this would be a great effort, even for Africans, knowing that we are creating born global Pan African products. That would be good for investors, knowing that the assured population of 1.8 billion on the African continent and saying the youthful population, these are keys. Again, especially for Ghana, we are promoting digital entrepreneurship. We don't just want to look to be consumers of the product, but we want to be creators and service providers as well in the digital space. Uh, where are the national interests of investors? That these are not brick and mortar products. These are not big.
Well, since I'm not Kwame.
I think it's having issues with connectivity.
Okay, all right.
I mean,
Uh,
Thomas, one key
yeah,
thing
sorry, Kwame.
I would like to also mention is that look, we need to learn from each other. Countries need to learn from each other. Achievements and mistakes. It's a cycle, all right, and we need to learn from each other. If necessarily, we need to have standard documents, okay, and checklists that will guide public institutions in different sectors. Some of the countries are doing well in road sector, others are doing well in the telecom sector, others are doing well in the oil and gas. So I think these are things that we can do to help each other to make sure that we attract the needed partnership arrangements in Africa.
So I think learning from each other is a point that has run across from Johnson, Michael, and Kwame. I think even Kwame added that we need to scale up some of these initiatives that are working well in some countries. We need to scale it up and deploy it across the continent. And just to add to that, I think Smart Africa Alliance, sort of is trying to do something similar where they sort of pilot some projects and the ones that are working well, try and see how they can scale it up and then make it available. We've got private partners who are working towards making it possible. I think some of the other points is building a conducive atmosphere for both for the private sector and the public sector. Building local financial architecture. Let bring in capacity and around PPP to deliver the digital infrastructure. And most importantly, the government needs to be clear on their goal, their plan, their agenda, so that the private partners know exactly what's expected, how they can plug in the partner to deliver on these initiatives by the government. So on that note, I want to say a big thank you to Johnson, Michael, and Kwame for your insightful session today. And at this point, I think there are some questions from our viewers. So we'll have a look at the questions and we'll see how best we can answer that. So the first one is from Umar. It says the mismatch between the rapid pace of technological change and the lengthy processes and funding mechanisms of PPPs creates significant challenge on Africa's digital transformation. His question is how can we address the issue and make PPPs more agile and aligned with technological advancements? So, who'd like to take that first? Maybe Johnson?
Yeah, I totally agree with the concern from the audience. It's true. Uh, the process at times can be very lengthy, and this discourages the players that are involved in these projects. There's need for government to make sure that we can strike a balance between, you know, doing all these assessments that take time, of course, and also the need to make sure that we can quickly bring good projects to the market. There is need for us to review the regulatory framework to make sure that it accelerates the delivery of projects to the market. There is need to streamline the processes to make sure that we can not combine, we can actually uh, accelerate the screening of these projects during feasibility studies, structuring and preparation so that they can be brought to the market. This can only happen if government understands the importance of having this in place in terms of attracting private sector investment. So, as much as this assessment needs to be done, there's need for us to constantly make sure that the laws in place, the processes in place, are aligned towards delivering better and quality projects to the market.
Thank you, Johnson. Michael, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think I agree with what Johnson mentioned, but the processes need to be looked into, and it all boils down to making sure that we have the right frameworks in place, okay, to make sure that the bureaucracies in getting things done are properly dealt with. And like I mentioned earlier, sometimes um, some of the funding will come um, very expensive, but if you have also the private sectors coming together, all right, like what we did with the World Bank project, it can reduce also um, the funding that the individual organizations or private institutions need to bring to make sure that we get this challenge taken care of. I mean, it's a very interesting question, and I think this is something that we need to look at.
Kwame, anything to add to that?
Yes, I will take on the lengthy processes. One, when government agencies adopt digitalization, the processes will be faster. But not everything can be solved by digitalization. Sometimes it's just the approving authorities. Some investments need to go to parliament. And again, we have to respect our procurement laws. For some people, for anything, because they are in opposition, anything that a ruling government initiates, they have to put opposition to it. And this can be a very big disincentive. What it is with digitalization is that it comes with novelties. I mean, you may not have the opportunity of having three people to or three companies to shortlist. You have to get going with whoever comes first. And I think that there will need to be further education for policymakers, lawmakers, and people in government in opposition as to how to make PPPs thrive fast. And again, you have to give them the protection. 10 to 15 years. We did that for May 1 when you were coming in with a second fiber network to Ghana. And because they were a neutral network and others can just be on that with that protection, it was able to strive and get a good return on investment. And same we are doing with our 5G shared network. So that, I mean, people, because we've gained so much from our rural network for many years that we're waiting for many communities to be to be connected. We've used a singular network to get everybody or every network roaming on a singular network, and that has strive for us. So we have to find new ways, especially for those who make decisions, so that the labor processes will not be lengthy, and then there'll be protection for everyone. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Kwame. So we'll take the next question. So next question is from Kwabna Amfo. What government agency is responsible for monitoring PPP projects in Ghana? I think Kwame, you be the best person to answer this one. Kwame, are you there? Hello, Kwame.
Do not have yes, do not have various sectors and ministries. Previous government minister responsible for PPPs. That was responsible for procurement in Ghana. And so for every agent or for every sector, they have their own units that may be dealing with PPPs. That is the situation. But I mean, usually the Ministry of Finance is at this because it involves this
I think that wasn't clear, but I think parts of it I got was your various sectors have their ministries and agencies who are responsible for monitoring these projects and initiatives. But then ultimately, it looks like the Ministry of Finance is one of the key government agency that's overlooked because there's no financing involved in that. And a lot of these financing goes through the Public Procurement Authority. So I hope I got that summary right. So we'll take the next question. So this is from Titus. He says, I think in PPPs, they are PPPs that are geared towards provision of public goods, especially those that are rights-based those are right-based water, health, etc. It's important to create a regulatory and governance framework that protects communities or users from exploitation. In some cases, it can further limit access due to costs, etc. I believe that was just a contribution. I don't know if any of the speakers want to comment on that, his contribution.
Yeah, maybe I can add to the comment by Titus Kuria from Kenya, I suppose.
Yeah.
Um, this is some of the social infrastructure projects and services that, of course, are not financially viable, and because of that, for them to be procured through the PPP model, government has to intervene in various ways to make sure that they can be bankable and attractive to the private sector. And additionally, of course, there's need for government to be involved in terms of regulating um, whether it's prices, just to make sure that we do not lock out uh, the users, especially those that are not able to afford the prices that will be pegged for accessing those services. So government has a significant role to regulate and also to provide support mechanisms so that those projects can be bankable, so that the ultimate price or charge that will be levied to the users is one that is affordable and accessible to the users.
All right. Thank you very much, Johnson. Can we have the next question, please?
Sorry, what's the question?
And we're waiting for the next question to come up. Okay, the next question is me, Ado. That goes to Johnson. Um, he's asking if your hub is in Ghana and how can he access your trainings.
Oh, thank you very much. So Miendo Misingi Hub is incorporated in Kenya. The idea is to make sure that at some point we can replicate whatever we do in East Africa across Africa. However, we are accessible. Most of our trainings are offered virtually. We are an accredited training organization that is authorized to offer trainings for PPP, all the three levels of PPP certifications. But besides that, we offer practical and hands-on trainings on project finance and PPPs. So you can reach out to us, and then we'll provide guidelines as to how you can access our trainings, which run in across the entire year. Back to you, Thomas.
Africa is on the fast road to economic progress, driven by financial inclusion and socio-economic advancement. Ascend Digital is accelerating this progress in Ghana through its Rural Wireless program, which provides connectivity to over 3.4 million citizens, and its joint venture, Digital Infrastructure Ventures, which is enabling the delivery of e-transformation solutions to over 900 state institutions nationwide through high-speed wireless broadband. Smart Infraco, a subsidiary of Ascend Digital, is a key enabler of this journey and a technical partner of NIDA under Ghana's Ministry of Communications and Digitalization.
Seem to have chopped up briefly. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, we
Yes,
can
we
hear
can hear
you,
you, Thomas.
Thomas.
We can hear
Okay,
you.
great. Sorry, I think I dropped off briefly this time around. So, all right. So, can we have the next question, please? Okay. So that is from Evans. He says you've mentioned government in several cases as one of the important stakeholders, I believe. How come you don't have any rep from the government sectors? I guess that's from us. So Evans, we have a rep from the government sector, and that's Kwame. Kwame is with the Ministry of Communications and Digitalization Ghana, as well as the National Communications Authority. So thank you very much, Evans. Next question. I believe those are all the questions we have for now. Anyway, on that note, today we've been discussing public-private partnerships in Africa's digital transformation. We've had Johnson Kulangi, Michael Kabla, and Michael Ba Echamfor, who've given their perspectives. Johnson having been on both the public and private side, um, Michael coming from private side, and Kwame coming from public sector. So they've given their perspectives. They've spoken about what PPP is, We've highlighted the challenges in PPP, some of the risks technology poses with PPP, having to adapt to the changing technologies. Looking at the types of financing that we can consider for PPPs, and not just always looking at foreign financing, but looking at local financing. We can how we can protect the local currency, and also getting those in the diaspora to get involved. One of the key things is also for the governments to be clear on their agenda, their plan, um, so that the private sector can sort of plug in and partner with the government on these initiatives. The key thing that came up in the end was that there needs to be more collaboration. We need to share lessons across the continent so that we can learn from each other and sort of scale up some of the initiatives that worked well in some countries, scale it up and replicate it across the continent. So on that note, I would say thank you very much, Johnson, Michael, and Kwame, for being with us this afternoon. It's been a very insightful discussion, and we hope that we can have you next time for more deliberations. And to our audience, thank you very much for joining us today. If you have any other questions for any of the speakers, you can send it to
Africa is on the fast road to economic progress, driven by financial inclusion and socioeconomic advancement. Ascend Digital is accelerating this progress in Ghana through its Rural Wireless program, which provides connectivity to over 3.4 million citizens, and its joint venture, Digital Infrastructure Ventures, which is enabling the delivery of e-transformation solutions to over 900 state institutions nationwide through high-speed wireless broadband. Smart Infraco, a subsidiary of Ascend Digital, is a key enabler of this journey and a technical partner of NIDA under Ghana's Ministry of Communications and Digitalization. Smart Infraco is leveraging the government's world-class digital infrastructure to bring seamless connectivity to public institutions and help operators deliver advanced voice and data services. Together, Ascend Digital and Smart Infraco are realizing the vision of holistic digital empowerment for Africa.